Hi everyone, Flaming Footy here and welcome back to a new YouTube video on the channel. And today guys, we're going to be continuing our AFL 2023 round previews for the 2023 AFL season. And in today's video, we are going to be previewing every game coming up in round 8 of the 2023 AFL season. But before we do go ahead and start, we like to review the last round. Port Adelaide got over St Kilda by 7, they defeated the Saints by 7. Brisbane defeated the Dockers by 48. The Giants defeated the Swans by 1. The Dogs defeated Hawthorn by 29. Melbourne smashed North Melbourne by 90. Carlton smashed West Coast by 108. Geelong defeated Essendon by 28. Gold Coast defeated Richmond by 24. And Collingwood defeated Adelaide by 1. 2 1-point wins last round in a nail-biting round of footy, and we'll go through the ladder as it currently stands. Collingwood on top. Melbourne, St Kilda, Brisbane, Port Adelaide 20, Carlton 18, Geelong 16, Crows 16, Essendon, Bulldogs 16, Sydney, GWS, Gold Coast 12, Fremantle North 8, Richmond 6 points, Hawthorn and West Coast 4. Alright, here we go, start the round 8. Preview, Friday night footy, Carlton versus Brisbane at Marvel Stadium. This is a big game, and if you want to beat Carlton, you have to... You have to stop Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow. We saw last week when them two can do whatever they want, they will destroy you. So Brisbane got to get their defensive matchups right, but they are a good defensive side, so I have no problem with that. This is definitely probably one of the 50-50 games. There are definitely a few 50-50 games this round, but this is definitely one of them. It's a big Friday night contest, and both sides would like to win this game. Carlton finally hit back into form. Brisbane, they're travelling really well at the moment. Now, Marvel Stadium, this will be interesting to see. Brisbane, they're not the best side there, but I feel like with their team rocking and rolling and ticking at the moment, I feel like they can get a nice 13-point win here. So I think the Lions win this one by 13. Alright, so now the next game is Richmond versus West Coast, the MCG, Saturday afternoon footy. And this is a lower end of the ladder game, but definitely big for, well, especially Richmond, considering their start to the year has been far from what they would have wanted. After showing up in only really a few games, in last week versus Gold Coast, they did not show up at all. They need to win this game. They're in 16th at the moment, and if they don't get a wriggle on in the next few rounds, their season could be over by round 11. Yeah, they've got a testing few weeks. So this is just one which they absolutely have to bank. West Coast, they've got only about 26 or 27 fit players, so that is enough to name a squad, but that is it. So their injury list is very long. I reckon Richmond win this game by 59, but West Coast might contend, but I still feel like with the names Richmond have and the injuries to big name players West Coast have will just make this game quite a boring contest. Geelong versus Adelaide is the second Saturday afternoon game at Cardinia Park. And Adelaide last week versus Collingwood weren't great. They kicked 16 behinds and lost it off their own boot for the third time this year, which is definitely disappointing. The Cats, they looked really good against Essendon, and their forward line, I mean, their whole team is just clicking after an 0-3 start, but some really good wins against Hawthorn, Sydney, West Coast, and then now Essendon, so that they are back on the road are the Cats, and the Crows' form against Hawthorn away from home was definitely concerning, which I do feel like poses a bit of a problem on the road, GMHBA Stadium. That's why I think the Cats win this game by 41. Gold Coast versus Melbourne, Heritage Bank Stadium is a Saturday twilight game. Gold Coast put up a great effort against Richmond last week and won by 24 in the end, in what really turned out to be a pretty boring contest. At the end of the day, when they got on top of Richmond, who have a poor record at Marvels, we do know. If it was in the MCG, probably would have been a little bit of a different story, perhaps. But look, they're looking good, Gold Coast. I feel like they're getting to a bit of form. They're definitely getting into a little bit of form. That they're getting somewhere, and with a good win over North, and now that win over Richmond, that's 2 wins in a row. Does give them a little bit of confidence, but this is a big test. Melbourne are not an easy beat. At Heritage Bank Stadium does give them a little bit of help. It is their home venue. They did beat the Cats there. But again, though, I think this will be a game where Gold Coast will show up for most of the contest, but I think Melbourne will be too strong, running over them by 19 points, because we saw they did to North Melbourne last week. I think Gold Coast should show up. This could be a game where they get absolutely destroyed, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I think Melbourne will get over by only 19. I think Gold Coast will challenge. So to the first of two Saturday night games, the Channel 7 Saturday night game is going to be GWS versus Western Bulldogs at Manuka Oval. Now, GWS hosted their first Manuka Oval home game round 6, and now they're back in round 8. So they've hosted 2 home games in a row at Manuka Oval, and they've got their big rivals, aside from Sydney, the Western Bulldogs there. These two clubs do have a very good rivalry, and it's one of the games of the rounds, arguably. I feel like the Giants have momentum after that big win over Sydney. That they do have momentum and could definitely steal the win. And they've been competitive in most of their contests as well, the Giants, this year. They haven't lost by a massive margin in most of their games, so they've been pretty good. And the Dogs only just scraping over Hawthorn last week after the Hawks gave it up to them. They gave them a really good fight. But in the end, for Bont's 200 game, the script was written perfectly. They get over the line in the end. This is a big game. I was thinking about the Giants in an upset, but look, after a few not so great weeks starting off the year, I went the safe tip Western Bulldogs. I think with some of their big star-studded names and Sam Taylor being out for a long period of time with that big Dogs forward line, Jamar Ugle-Hagan, Aaron Norton, I reckon that's going to be too tough to handle. I think the Dogs will win by 11 in a good contest in the nation's capital, the ACT. Second Saturday night game at Optus Stadium, Fremantle versus Hawthorn. Now this is Fremantle's Starlight or Twilight. I'm pretty sure it's a Starlight game with where they've got the stars on the Guernsey. Versus Hawthorn, who last week did hit back in a bit of form. They played pretty well versus Western Bulldogs. They did go missing in the second half, but the first half performance was good from the Hawks. Then they slipped away. Fremantle at Optus Stadium aren't the easiest side to beat, but they've showed this year that, they've had a pretty poor start this year and need to win. And I feel like both these two sides need a win. It's 14th versus 17th, so it could create quite an interesting contest. These two sides desperately need a win. Hawthorn, I reckon they're going to go over there with a bit of confidence from their game, and Mitch Lewis back into the side is a handy inclusion for them for sure. But I think Fremantle in a close contest will just scrape by and get the job done by 16. But I reckon this one could go either way, and I reckon the Hawks are well and truly in for what could be an upset thriller. Again, going with the safe tip at Optus Stadium, saying the Dockers. Port Adelaide versus Essendon kicks off the Sunday games. The first one being at the Adelaide Oval between Port Adelaide and Essendon. And both these two sides have been in reasonably good form to start off this year. Port Adelaide are in 5th, Essendon are in 9th. And look, Essendon, they did win back in Gather Round versus Melbourne at this venue. So they have pretty decent thoughts, and they came close to beating Port there last year as well in the wet. So, big game though, this one. Port Adelaide last week versus St Kilda were very good. I think if they had lost that game, probably would have gone some people to start leaning with Essendon, but no, another safe tip I've gone here. Essendon could definitely upset. Port Adelaide do have a smaller defence line though, which could cause problems if Wiedemann and Wright, if they are playing, are on. But yeah, I think Port Adelaide will be a little bit too good in the end, getting over by 19. Collingwood versus Sydney is the Channel 7 Sunday game, the MCG, and this looks to be a really exciting contest a few weeks ago. Don't know if it will be that exciting anymore. Collingwood, they've looked good. They got over the Crows by a point in the end, and they just did enough. And Sydney last week versus the Giants didn't look that great. Even with Sam Taylor out, couldn't capitalise enough and lost by a point. Now, Sydney, I'm not sure. I'll have to check and see if their stars are returning this week. So, Paddy McCartan, not quite sure on his timeline return, and Dane Rampy's still a fair way off. So, they're still going to be missing that personnel down in defence. Sydney, which could definitely lead for a big opportunity for the Collingwood forwards, and they didn't really capitalise a lot last week versus Adelaide either, but I feel like they'll be able to get the job done by 21 in the end. I think they'll have a decent day out, and Sydney's defence last week did prove not as great as what they would like it to be, and not as great as it normally is with the likes of Rampy and the other McCartan down there, so I feel like Collingwood will be able to capitalise and win the game. North Melbourne versus St Kilda is the last game of the round, and speaking to honest, it's not looked to be an exciting matchup at Marvel. It's a Sunday twilight game, and North Melbourne a few weeks ago, there was back in round 4, there was a bit of hype over them, a bit of thought, which there's some belief this year. There could be something happening, and Alistair Clarkson could lift them up and actually make a decent year out of it in the last few weeks. So reality has come falling all the way back down to earth. and North Melbourne are back at where they probably would have been finishing this year, and they are definitely a bottom 3 side this year at the moment, and I think they're going to get absolutely smashed by the Saints in the biggest margin of the weekend. I reckon the Saints are going to absolutely smash them by 67 points, as North are a bit all over the place, but they are a young rebuilding side under Alistair Clarkson. They are focusing on young talent, and again, we do know from sides they've done young rebuilds in the past, and the way Adelaide worked it, they're starting to get some reward for effort, and what Hawthorn are doing at the moment, it can take a little bit of time. If you are invested and committed to getting those young players prepared, it might take a little while, and it looks like that is what North might be doing, but after a bit of hype, they have come falling back to earth. I think the Saints will get a pretty comprehensive win. Alright, so make sure to go ahead and watch my Timmy video if you want to see exact scores. But my round 8 tips are Brisbane by 13, Richmond by 59, Geelong by 41, Melbourne by 19, Western Bulldogs by 11, Fremantle by 16, Port Adelaide by 19, Collingwood by 21, and St Kilda by 67. And here is my ladder after round 8. Things are starting to get a little bit set up on this ladder as well. We can see where teams are at and where things are going. So, yeah, if you want to go ahead and pause this ladder, make sure that you go ahead and do so. But, yeah. Last thing before we wrap up this round preview, it does seem to be a bit of a thing where we go through some stat leaders, so why not do it again? Cold medal leader at the moment is tied. It's Charlie Colonel on 30 and Jeremy Cameron on 30, who have a very comprehensive lead from the rest of the competition. Tom Hawkins is on 22. He's the next closest player. Nick Dagos has the most disposals. James Sicily, Jacob Wiedering are equal on marks. Score involvements, Kerno, Cameron, Green make up the top 3. And there are the other stats. Alright, big round of footy coming up in round 8, and I am looking forward to it. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. So then you guys will never miss another video on the channel. Thank you guys all so much, and bye everyone. Flame Footy out.